It was a bright afternoon, and Manny Pacquiao had chosen to spend it simply. No entourage, no cameras, no flashing lights. Just him, his wife, and two of his children walking together through a quiet public park. For once, the boxing legend wasn't a world champion or a senator. He was simply a father enjoying time with his family. As they strolled along, Manny kept his usual calm and warm demeanor, greeting people with a smile when recognized. Many passers-by didn't even realize who he was. Dressed in a simple polo, shirt, jeans, and sneakers, he looked like any ordinary man enjoying a peaceful day. But not everyone saw it that way. From across the park, a police officer fixed his eyes on Manny. The officer's brows furrowed, as if something about Manny's presence bothered him. Instead of seeing a family man, the officer saw someone who, in his eyes, didn't belong. Moments later, the officer approached. His tone was sharp, his posture intimidating. "Hey, you. What are you doing here?" he demanded, looking Manny up and down as though searching for a reason to pick a fight. Manny turned slightly, surprised, but still polite. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm just spending time with my family." The officer didn't soften, instead he pressed harder, his questions becoming unnecessarily aggressive. "Where are you from? Do you even live around here? Show me some ID." Manny's wife gently squeezed his arm, concern in her eyes. The children glanced nervously between their father and the officer. Manny, however, remained calm. His voice stayed steady, his body language respectful. "I don't see any problem here, sir," Manny said softly, refusing to rise to the hostility. "I'm with my family. We're just here to enjoy the day." The officer wasn't satisfied. His suspicion grew louder, his voice carrying across the park. A few people stopped to watch, sensing tension. And then came the moment that would change everything. The moment when the officer's aggression clashed with Manny's quiet strength. What Manny did next shocked everyone standing there. The park grew quieter as the officer's voice rose louder. His stance was confrontational, his hands resting on his belt as if ready to escalate. He looked Manny straight in the eye, dismissing the calm explanations he had already been given. "I asked you for ID. Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the officer barked. Manny slowly reached for his wallet, but his movement was cautious. He wasn't trying to provoke. He wasn't trying to resist. He was simply showing respect, a lesson ingrained in him since childhood. "Here is my identification, sir," Manny said, handing it over politely. But instead of ending the situation, the officer seemed irritated. He barely glanced at the ID, then scoffed. "This doesn't mean anything. You think a card proves you belong here? Answer me properly. Why are you in this neighborhood?" Manny's wife shifted uneasily, whispering, "Let's just walk away." But Manny knew that. Walking away could make it worse. If he turned his back now, the officer might interpret it as defiance. So, he stood firm. "Officer, I have explained. I am here with my family, that is all." The officer stepped closer, closing the gap between them. His voice was sharp, his tone laced with suspicion. "Don't get smart with me. People like you don't usually come here unless there's trouble." That sentence struck the crowd. Several bystanders already watching curiously felt a chill. They recognized the undertone, the ugly prejudice hidden behind the officer's words. One young man pulled out his phone and began recording. Soon, others followed. A small circle was forming, phones raised, eyes wide. But Manny remained unshaken. His eyes didn't flinch, his tone didn't rise. "I mean no disrespect, officer, I am not here to cause trouble. I only ask that you treat me as you would anyone else." The officer's jaw tightened. He was losing control of the moment, but instead of calming down, he doubled down. His voice rose, sharp enough to draw more attention. "Don't lecture me. You're lucky I haven't cuffed you already." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The sight was surreal. A police officer threatening a man who refused to fight back. A man who met hostility with humility. Manny's children clutched their mother's hands, fear evident in their eyes. His wife's voice trembled. "Manny, please," but Manny stood tall. He didn't raise his hands in aggression, only kept them calmly at his sides. His very stillness was a quiet act of defiance. his refusal to surrender his dignity. Phones kept recording. The tension in the air grew thicker, each second stretching longer than the last. The crowd could sense something important was happening. One of the bystanders whispered, "Why is the cop going after him? He's done nothing wrong." Another replied, "I don't know, but I'm glad we're filming." Manny took a slow breath and spoke again, his tone respectful but firm. "Officer, I have answered your questions. I ask you now, please, let me be with my family. This is not necessary." The officer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't tell me what's necessary. You don't call the shots here. I do." The crowd grew restless. The phones kept rolling. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to outrage. What had started as a simple outing was turning into a public confrontation, one that would not be forgotten. Have you ever seen someone abused by authority? Comment below where you're watching this from. The officer's tone grew sharper, with every word his posture stiff and aggressive. The park, once filled with laughter and casual chatter, had gone eerily silent. All eyes were now fixed on the confrontation. "Listen here," the officer snarled, stepping even closer to Manny. "If you don't start cooperating the way I want, you're going to regret it." Manny didn't move. He didn't flinch. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a quiet strength. He was no stranger to confrontation. After all, he had faced the fiercest boxers in the world inside the ring. But this was different. This was not about fists or titles. This was about dignity. "I have already cooperated, officer," Manny replied evenly. "I have given you my ID. I have answered your questions. There is nothing more to explain." The officer's lips curled into a smirk. "You think you're clever, huh? I can haul you down to the station right now if I want. Your family will have to find their way home without you." His wife gasped softly, clutching their children closer. Her eyes pleaded with Manny. "Don't push this further. Please just give him what he wants." "Papa, let's go," his young son whispered, tugging on his arm. "Please." But Manny gently placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a reassuring touch. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're not doing anything wrong." The officer, noticing the family's unease, seemed to draw power from it. He puffed his chest, his voice carrying across the park. "You think you can stand here and question me? You think you're above the law?" A murmur spread through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered, "Why is he treating him like that? The man hasn't done a thing." Phones stayed raised, capturing every second. One bystander muttered, "This doesn't feel right. He's crossing the line." The officer ignored the growing crowd. His focus was locked on Manny. He raised a finger, pointing it inches from Manny's face. "Last chance. Do as I say, or I'll make sure you regret standing here." Manny's wife's voice broke through, trembling with fear. "Manny, please, he's not listening. Just let's walk away. Don't risk this." But Manny shook his head gently. He knew walking away would send the wrong message, not just to his children but to everyone watching. To back down to injustice was to teach them that unfair treatment should be tolerated. He stood straighter, his presence calm but unyielding. "With respect, officer, I will not be humiliated. I have done nothing wrong. I am not breaking any law." The officer's face flushed red, anger boiling over. His voice thundered, "Don't you dare talk back to me. I'll put you in cuffs." "Right now!" Gasps echoed from the crowd. Mothers shielded their children's eyes, sensing the situation could spiral out of control. The phones shook in the hands of bystanders, hearts pounding as they recorded what could turn into a tragedy. The tension was unbearable. Manny's wife grabbed his arm again, her eyes wet with tears. "Please, think of the kids," she begged. "Just say sorry, just give him what he wants, let's go home." But Manny remained steady, his breathing slow, his face serene. He looked at his wife with love, then back at the officer with quiet defiance. "I will not apologize for existing. I will not apologize for being here with my family. I respect the law, but I will not bow to injustice." The officer stepped back slightly, taken aback by the firmness in Manny's voice. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. But pride and prejudice unkept him from backing down. The crowd, however, felt the shift. A murmur spread, louder this time. He's standing up for himself. He's right. He hasn't done anything. The officer barked again, desperate to maintain control. Enough! You think you're some kind of hero? You'll see what happens when you challenge authority. The air was electric now, heavy with fear and anticipation. Manny's children clung to their mother, trembling. The officer's hand hovered dangerously close to his cuffs, and the crowd held its breath. Everyone knew. Something had to give. Either Manny would be taken away unjustly, or the truth would finally break free. And in that tense silence, one question lingered in the minds of everyone watching. Who exactly was this man who refused to be broken? The standoff in the park had drawn nearly 50 people now. Some stood on benches to get a better view. Others whispered nervously, unsure whether to intervene. The officer, still red with anger, kept barking orders. Manny stood calm, steady, unshaken. But then, something shifted. From the edge of the crowd, a young man squinted at Manny, tilting his head as if trying to match a memory with reality. His phone was already recording, but his expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened. "Wait. Hold on," he whispered to the person next to him. "That's Manny Pacquiao." The words spread like sparks in dry grass. "What? Manny Pacquiao? The boxer? No way, look closely, that's him, that's the Manny Pacquiao." Within seconds, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, voices buzzed. People started holding their phones higher, zooming in, realizing that the humble man standing calmly against the officer's aggression wasn't just any father on a family outing. He was a global icon, an 8-division world champion, a senator, a philanthropist known across continents. Whispers became gasps. Gasps became excitement. "Oh my God, it really is him," one woman exclaimed, clutching her chest. "That's Manny Pacquiao standing right there." The officer, however, didn't notice. His focus was still locked on trying to intimidate. "I told you, one more word and I'll cuff you right here," he barked. But the atmosphere had changed. The crowd's energy was no longer fear and pity. It was shock and admiration. People began speaking louder now, unafraid of being overheard. Why is he treating Manny Pacquiao like that? Doesn't he know who he's talking to? That's the people's champ. He's a senator back home in the Philippines. Phones streamed live across social media. Comments started flooding in as viewers confirmed the truth. "Yes, that's Manny. Unbelievable. Look at how he's handling this." Still, Manny himself said nothing of his identity. He did not pull rank. He did not announce who he was. He stood as any ordinary man would, calm, humble, composed. His wife, still clutching the children, looked around as whispers spread. She could see people pointing, phones flashing, recognition dawning on faces. Relief flickered in her eyes, but also confusion. Why wasn't Manny using his name to end this? Because Manny didn't want this to be about fame. He didn't want to win respect because of who he was, but because of the principle he stood for. One older man in the crowd finally stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. "Officer, do you even know who you're talking to?" The officer shot him a glare. "Stay out of this." But the crowd wasn't silent anymore. More voices rose. "That's Manny Pacquiao. He's a world champion. He's helped thousands of people. What are you doing harassing him?" The officer blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "Pacquiao," he muttered under his breath, uncertain. He shook it off quickly, refusing to show weakness. "I don't care who he is," the officer snapped, trying to maintain control. "Nobody is above the law." But the words landed differently now. The crowd wasn't with him anymore. They weren't intimidated. They were outraged. The power dynamic was shifting, and for the first time the officer sensed it. Manny remained quiet, not confirming nor denying his identity. His silence only fueled the tension. The crowd's whispers grew louder, their phones capturing not just the harassment, but the patience, the composure, The dignity of the man at the center of it all. A teenage boy near the front gasped, eyes shining. That's my hero. That's really him. And he's standing there so calm, he's not even bragging about who he is. The people began to cheer softly, not for the confrontation, but for Manny's strength of character. The energy around him swelled like a tide. The officer, however, still clung to control. He puffed his chest again, barking, "Enough of this! I said step back!" But his words no longer carried authority. The crowd wasn't afraid. They were protective. And Manny? He still hadn't said the one thing that could instantly end the conflict. "I am Manny Pacquiao." Instead, he stood as a man, ordinary, humble, strong, and let the world decide what kind of justice it demanded. The officer's authority was crumbling. He could feel the crowd shifting, their murmurs growing into open defiance. But instead of backing down, his pride pushed him further. "You people better keep quiet," he snapped at the bystanders. "This is official police business. Stay out of it." The words only fueled the crowd's anger. Dozens of voices rose in protest. "He didn't do anything wrong. Why are you harassing him? We're not staying quiet anymore." Manny stood silently for a moment, absorbing it all. His wife still clung to his arm, her face pale with worry. His children stared up at him, eyes wide, searching for strength in their father's expression. And then Manny spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Calm, steady, deliberate. "Officer," he began, "I have answered you with respect. I have given you my identification. I have explained why I am here. And still, you have chosen to treat me with hostility, as if my existence is a crime." The crowd hushed instantly. Even the officer froze, caught off guard by the shift in tone. Manny's words cut through the air with the weight of truth. He took a step forward, closing the distance, his eyes never leaving the officer's. "You stand here in a uniform that demands respect. But respect is earned, not forced. When you profile people, when you treat families as suspects without reason, you do not uphold the law. You dishonor it." Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Phones zoomed in closer, capturing every word. The officer bristled, trying to regain control. "Watch your mouth, you think you can lecture me." But Manny didn't stop. His voice grew firmer, not angry, but unshakably strong. "I do not lecture you, I remind you. Every man, every woman, every child deserves dignity. Authority is not a weapon to use against the powerless. It is a duty to protect them." The crowd erupted in cheers. The officer's face turned red, his jaw clenched tight. For the first time, he was the one on the defensive. "You don't know who you're messing with," the officer spat, his words trembling with frustration. "I could—" Manny raised his hand slightly, silencing him without aggression. His eyes burned with quiet intensity. "I know exactly who I am facing, and I will not be silenced. Not for myself, not for my children watching, not for the people who have suffered the same treatment in silence. Enough is enough." A powerful hush swept across the park. The officer's words died in his throat. He had lost the crowd, and he knew it. His threats, once sharp and intimidating, now sounded hollow. The bystanders broke the silence with shouts of support. "He's right. Stand tall, Manny. That's what courage looks like." Some clapped, others raised their fists, their voices echoing with solidarity. The officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the sea of phones pointed at him. His authority was slipping away, not because Manny fought back with force, but because Manny's truth carried more power than his badge. Manny took a deep breath, then lowered his voice so it resonated even more. "Officer, I am not your enemy. I am a father, a husband, a man who believes in justice. But I will never accept being treated as less than human. Not today, not ever." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children watching from the crowd felt the gravity of the moment. Manny wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, dismissed, or profiled without cause. And as he stood there, shoulders squared, voice calm but unyielding, The officer's power drained away. His threats no longer mattered. His authority no longer intimidated. Because in that moment, Manny Pacquiao's presence, humble yet commanding, had turned the tide. The cop may not have realized it yet, but the balance of power had shifted. The crowd was with Manny now. The truth was with Manny. Justice was with Manny. And the officer was left standing alone. The officer's face was burning red, his breathing heavy as he tried to hold on to authority. But his words had lost their weight. The crowd wasn't afraid of him anymore. They were standing with Manny. From the back, a middle-aged man pushed through, his phone still raised. He pointed at Manny, his voice ringing clear. "Don't you see, that's Manny Pacquiao?" The name carried through the crowd like lightning. This time it wasn't whispered, it was shouted. The energy shifted instantly. More voices joined in. "Yes, that's Manny Pacquiao, the champion. The people's champ. He's a senator, a hero to millions." The officer blinked, confusion flickering across his face. He turned to Manny, eyes narrowing as if trying to process what he was hearing. "Pacquiao," he muttered under his breath. And then, from the edge of the gathering, another officer arrived, drawn by the noise. Unlike his colleague, this one recognized Manny instantly. His eyes widened and he rushed forward, his voice urgent. "Stop! That's Senator Manny Pacquiao." The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with outrage. Some applauded, others shouted angrily at the first officer. "Do you know who you were disrespecting? How could you treat him like that? He's a global champion and you harassed him in front of his family." The officer's posture faltered. His shoulders slumped slightly, his bluster fading into unease. The realization hit him. The man he had been threatening, the man he tried to humiliate, was not just any passerby. He was one of the most respected athletes and public figures in the world. Manny, however, didn't gloat. He didn't flash a triumphant smile or throw his fame in the officer's face. He remained steady, his calm expression unchanged. "Yes," he said quietly, addressing the new officer. "I am Manny Pacquiao, but that should not matter. I should be treated with the same respect as any man here. No more, no less." The crowd went silent again, his words hitting harder than any punch he had ever thrown in the ring. The embarrassed officer stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I was just—" "You were profiling him," someone shouted from the crowd. "You abused your authority," yelled another. The officer's face turned pale. His hands, once so quick to rest on his cuffs, now fidgeted nervously at his sides. He tried to speak, but every word died in his throat. The tide had turned completely. The second officer stepped in, placing a firm hand on his colleague's shoulder. "That's enough. You've done enough." His tone carried both disappointment and authority. The first officer lowered his gaze, unable to meet Manny's eyes. The humiliation was complete, not because Manny had demanded it, but because his actions had exposed the truth. Meanwhile, the crowd cheered Manny's dignity. Strangers clapped, some even shouted his name proudly. Children who had been frightened now smiled with relief, tugging on their parents' sleeves. "That's Manny Pacquiao. He's a hero!" Manny raised a hand gently, quieting the cheers. His voice carried once more, calm but powerful. "Remember, respect should never depend on fame, money, or titles. Every person deserves it, whether you know their name or not." The crowd roared in approval. The officer, now small in the sea of voices, lowered his head in shame. And in that moment, Manny Pacquiao didn't just win a confrontation. He won the hearts of everyone present, not with fists but with humility and truth. The scene in the park ended not with handcuffs or violence, but with a lesson that would echo far beyond that day. The disgraced officer stood silent, eyes down, while his colleague quietly pulled him aside. The crowd cheered Manny not just for who he was, but for how he had carried himself, with dignity, humility, and courage. As Manny gathered his wife and children, people rushed closer, some asking for photos, others simply thanking him. "You showed us how to stand tall," one young man said, his voice trembling with emotion. Manny only smiled, replying softly, "Always choose respect." But that wasn't the end of the story. Within hours, the videos recorded by dozens of bystanders spread across social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Every platform was flooded with clips of the confrontation. Hashtags exploded: respect for Manny, or justice not profiling, Pacquiao dignity. The world was watching. Millions tuned in, their comments pouring in from every corner of the globe. He handled that better than any politician or celebrity ever could. This is why he's not just a champion in the ring, but in life. That officer just learned the lesson of a lifetime. News outlets picked it up. Headlines blared: Manny Pacquiao harassed by police, responds with grace and humility. Talk shows replayed the video. Analysts broke down his words like they were poetry. For many, it wasn't just about Manny. It was about what the moment represented. The officer faced immediate consequences. Internal investigations were launched. Public outrage demanded accountability. Within days, he was suspended, and calls for reform in his department grew louder. But Manny never once celebrated his downfall. When asked for comment by reporters, he simply said, "I forgive him. I don't hold anger in my heart. But I hope this teaches us all that no one should be judged by appearance. Every human being deserves respect." Those words, carried on television and shared online, struck deep. They weren't about revenge. They were about change. Manny had turned a moment of humiliation into a platform for justice. In the Philippines, people filled the streets with pride. From Manila to Mindanao, murals of Manny were painted, not of him with gloves raised in victory, but standing calmly in the park, facing injustice without fear. Around the world, educators and leaders quoted his words in classrooms, in speeches, in campaigns against discrimination. His children, who had once clung to him in fear, now looked at their father with even greater admiration. "Papa," his son said softly that night, "you didn't fight with your fists, but you still won." Manny smiled, hugging his children close. "The greatest fight is not always in the ring," he told them. "It's the fight to stay true to what is right." And so, a simple day in the park became a story that touched millions. A reminder that strength is not measured only in muscle, but in character. That authority without justice crumbles, while humility with truth endures. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance, type respect in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.